an area as big as the United States that's never been seen by a human being. And that's beyond the pole on the other side of the South Pole, and I think it's quite astonishing that there should be an area as big as that unexplored.
Admiral Richard.E. Byrd was not just an explorer, a leader, a formidable military figure. He was one of the most iconic naval officers in history. When he spoke, people listened.
It's by far the most valuable, important place left in the world for science.
In 1946 and 1947, following the end of World War II, Admiral Byrd led Operation Highjump, an operation with many goals, such as to establish a research base in Antarctica, training military personnel in extremely cold conditions, and exploring the feasibility of setting up military bases in the area in case of future attack, all of which is a fascinating and challenging endeavour in itself. It was only when Admiral Byrd's secret diary was found that it wasn't what he discovered above the ice that was shocking, but below. Operation Highjump was a huge military effort involving 4,700 personnel, 13 ships as well as aircraft and helicopters. They established a base in Antarctica called Little America 4. I would have called it This is Sparta, but that's just me. Little America 4 or This is Sparta, which is less likely to get attacked is all I'm saying. Where a key objective was to photograph as much of Antarctica as possible. Operation Highjump was grueling. Aircraft would practice takeoff and landing from ships for hours. Ships would clear passages through the inhospitable icebreakers, with helicopters giving them support. It is not to be over-exaggerated what a groundbreaking operation this was in the 1940s. The low temperatures meant that it took 60 minutes to prepare a helicopter for takeoff, involving heating the fuel, oil, engine and removing ice from rotor blades. On one occasion, a helicopter was caught in strong winds upon takeoff and crashed straight into the sea. During another reconnaissance mission, the rotors of a helicopter carrying Captain Dufek became coated in ice, causing it to crash. Dufek and the pilot froze to death in the freezing water. Sadly, 2 helicopters would be lost during Operation Highjump. Planes also suffered, where George 1 became involved in an ice blink where snow reflecting with the sun blinded the pilot, causing him to hit an object and crashing in a fireball to the ground below. All crewmen were instantly killed. This was a brutal and sometimes tragic operation. One morning, during a reconnaissance flight, Admiral Byrd's plane could not be contacted for 3 hours. His plane went missing. On return to base, it was put down to poor weather leading to radio malfunction, and that's the official story. But Admiral Byrd had a habit of writing everything down. And upon completion of Operation Highjump, on his return to America, his journals were taken by the government and classified. But they missed something. A diary. A diary so important that Admiral Byrd hid it. In this secret diary, Admiral Byrd documented what really happened to him during those 3 hours. And it wasn't poor weather. The diary explains that Admiral Byrd takes off as normal for his flight that day, checks in at 8:15 with base camp, situation normal. Then roughly an hour into his flight, he starts to see colours in the snow, and then his instruments start to not operate correctly. His compasses are malfunctioning, his controls are not moving smoothly. Despite this, Admiral Byrd continues flying towards a mountain range that he sees in the distance, and is astonished as he's never heard or seen of this range before. Exciting, but perhaps not unusual. But as he flies through the mountain range, he looks below to see luscious green valleys in Antarctica. That is unusual. He could not believe what he was seeing. As he writes, to the portside great forests growing on the mountain slopes. His instruments are unusable at this point, and so all he has to rely on to navigate are his eyes. And then as he looks up, he notices he can't see the sun anymore. And not only that, when he looks down to the green valleys below, he sees something shocking. A woolly mammoth grazing. Are you as confused as me at this point? In disbelief at what he's seeing, lush greenery in Antarctica and an animal that should be extinct, he suddenly realizes that he's sweating. He's hot. His instruments, now operational, are telling him that it's 23 degrees Celsius outside. Someone put the barbecue on. Anyone fancy woolly mammoth burgers? But he can't radio back to base. He simply cannot report the incredible things that he is seeing and experiencing. As he continues his flight over miles of green valleys, on the horizon, he then sees a city. As he approaches, he quickly realizes he's no longer in control of his plane. It is not responding at all to his commands. And then, out of the corner of his eye, he sees craft approaching, disc-shaped and completely silent. Then his engine cuts out. This is a serious situation. Ready to take emergency measures to save his life, he then notices that the plane is still flying. The crafts approach, and after hours of his radio not working, Admiral Byrd receives a communication.
Welcome, Admiral, to our domain. We shall land you in exactly 7 minutes. Relax, Admiral. You are in good hands.
The plane not under his control lands, where Admiral Byrd is received in what he writes as a cordial manner by tall people with blonde hair. Within alien mythology, my very favourite type of mythology, there is a race of aliens known as Nordics or Aryans. Tall, blue eyes, blonde hair, alien Vikings basically. That is a movie somewhat similar to what Admiral Byrd says he encountered. They boarded him onto a platform which took them towards the heart of the city. The city seemed to be made of crystal-like material when the platform suddenly stops at a giant building. He is given a warm drink, again which has a taste he's never experienced before. The next thing you know, you're going to wake up with a kidney missing. He is then led to an elevator inside the building. It descends, stops. The door opens and he's led down a hallway with rose-coloured lights. But these lights seem to be coming from the walls itself. One of the beings then tells Admiral Byrd to stop outside of a large door over which an inscription stands in a language he couldn't read.
Have no fear, Admiral. You are to have an audience with the Master.
Then Admiral Byrd writes this poignant statement. What greeted my eyes is the most beautiful sight of my entire existence. For a man who's travelled the world, that is quite the statement. And then he hears a voice.
I bid you welcome to our domain, Admiral.
Admiral Byrd sees an older man with delicate features, as he describes them, seated at a long table. The Master. The Master explains that he has let Admiral Byrd enter because he is a noble character in the surface world. The surface world? It is at that point when Admiral Byrd realizes he has entered the Hollow Earth. The Master told him he was in the domain of the Arianni people, the inner world, and that his people are alarmed by the detonation of the atomic bombs in Japan. The Arianni have never interfered in surface world matters, but as the Master explains, now they must. Humans have learned to tamper with atomic energy, which was not made for mankind. The Arianni, thousands of years more advanced than humans, have already sent messages to world leaders to warn them, messages which have been ignored.
Your race has now reached the point of no return.
The Master explained that the Arianni, out of desperation to purvey their warning, have even ventured onto the surface world in craft that they call Flugelrads, spell that for 5 points, or what we know as UFOs. But their craft were fired upon by the humans with hostility. This is why they chose Admiral Byrd. It was no accident, he was chosen. I mean, if there was one person that could speak to the president and be listened to, it was Admiral Richard.E. Byrd. Tell the people that this pursuit of atomic weapons will lead to the destruction of your race and the surface world. Farewell, my son. The meeting ended and Admiral Byrd was led out back to his plane, where some unknown force lifted it to 2,700 feet, where all of a sudden he gained control of his plane again and flew away. Upon returning home to America, Admiral Byrd passed on the Master's message to the President and the Pentagon. Upon releasing this information, he was instantly detained for 7 hours. And here are the chilling words of Admiral Byrd. I am ordered to remain silent in regard to all that I have learned on behalf of humanity. And he did. And it tortured his soul. A few years later, in his final entry in his diary, he gives us an insight into his state of mind. Now the long night begins to approach, but there shall be no end. Just as the long night of the Arctic ends, The brilliant sunshine of truth shall come again, and those who are of darkness shall fall in its light. For I have seen that land beyond the pole, that center of the great unknown. Admiral Byrd died very shortly after the last entry in his diary. But his son found the diary, and the rest, as they say, is history. Operation Highjump happened. It is a well-documented operation with visual images, footage and reports. Admiral Byrd's leadership during the operation is legendary. But what about his secret diary? Well, it's hard to substantiate that Richard.E. Byrd actually wrote it. There are, for example, inconsistencies in the diary, such as it being mentioned that he's flying in the North Pole, despite the operation taking place in Antarctica. That is what you call a bit of a whoopsie. The writing style of the diary itself doesn't match the writing style of validated documents scribed by Admiral Byrd. If you read the diary, you'll see that a lot of sentences are capitalized. There's a lot of exclamation marks, a lot of dramatic language. It just reads to me like fiction. You can find the diary online for free and judge for yourselves. Several books have been published on Inner Earth, and many referencing Admiral Byrd's diary, and to this day there are staunch believers that the diary is real and that the hollow earth is real. Operation Highjump managed to take 70,000 photos covering 1.5 million square miles of Antarctica. But to this day, Antarctica is very mysterious. In 1959, a few years after Admiral Byrd's death, the Antarctic Treaty was signed, which included restrictions on who could explore the area. Things are being tightly controlled. And we do know that during Operation Highjump, Admiral Byrd really did go missing for 3 hours. That is validated. But was it simply poor weather leading to radio malfunction? Or did Admiral Byrd find something incredible under the ice? And did the Arianni people really attempt to visit us in their craft to warn us in 1947? 1947.